everybody, I'm Tabitha and I've read 5 more books. Regular watchers of this channel will already know this, but I do book reviews every time I've read 5 books. You should know that I don't read just one specific age category or genre. I'm actually a reader of pretty much anything. So I will make sure to tell you what age category, what genre it is, and more importantly, what kind of readers I think will love the book that I'm reviewing. I do use a 5-star rating system to review all my books, so I'd like to take a quick second to tell you about that system. 5-star ratings are reserved for books that I absolutely love, that I think transcend genre. In other words, you might love this one even if you don't normally read the genre it's written in. 4-star books, on the other hand, are books that I absolutely love and think are great books, but they're more specific to the genre they are written for. 3-star ratings are for books that I think are good books, but they have a really niche audience. You might not love this one, even if you normally read this genre. 2-star ratings are the ratings I reserve for books that I think are problematic. I do try to explain some of the problems in the what I didn't love section so that you know if it's the kind of thing that would really bother you or not. 1-star rating, on the other hand, are reserved for books that I honestly didn't enjoy and can't recommend. They're just not for me. All right, with that out of the way, let's get to the reviews. The first book I read for the month of March is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This is a 2019 release by Little Brown and Company. It is 308 pages and it would be a young adult fantasy story. This is the third and final book in the Folk of the Air trilogy that began with Cruel Prince. Your synopsis. Jude is powerless and reeling from Carden's betrayal. She's biding her time, waiting for the moment to pay him back for everything he took from her. When her sister Taryn falls into some trouble, Jude will have to venture back to Fairy for one final confrontation. So what didn't I like about this book? A side note before I start, I should say that all the stuff I'm about to mention is really nitpicky. I really liked this book. The first thing I can say I didn't really like about it is that this book was a little predictable. It's not overly predictable, which we know would be really problematic for me, but there were some moments, more than in the previous 2 books, that I was able to predict exactly what was going to happen, and some of them were sort of big things. There will still be things in this book that will keep you wondering or that will surprise you, but don't be surprised if there's a few twists that you figure out. The other thing I can say I didn't particularly like about this one is that the lack of character backstory from some of the minor characters. The previous 2 books in the series felt like they were bringing in every character, making them important, making them real. This one introduced a few characters without really doing any of that. I'm specifically looking at Grimson and at Grimamog. I wanted more of both of those 2 characters, and I felt like in the previous book we would have gotten more. So that made those characters feel a little lackluster for me. So what did I like about this one? The first one, and this is a big one, is that Carden and Jude are just amazing. Let's be real, they are the reason that so many people keep coming back to this series. These 2 are enemies to lovers ramped up to like 1,000,000. Their banter keeps us coming back to the stories. I was happy with the way their storyline, their arc, their ending played out. I'm talking not just for this book, but series as a whole. I was happy with it. In my opinion, it was worth the read, and I think Carden and Jude fans will be satisfied. The next thing I can say I liked about this book is that, in general, it had satisfying character growth. The best kind of series should have marked growth for all of your characters. We want the character who started book 1 to learn and grow and be a different person than they are by the end of the trilogy. That's why we read them. And in my opinion, this series was really well done for that. It wasn't just Jude, but also Taryn and Carden, and really every character who's important to this story has growth of some kind and changes. They're not the same character at the end of the book, but I didn't want them to be. The last thing I can say I liked about this book, and it's been something I like about this series right from the beginning, is the detail Holly Black puts into the fairy world is awesome. You can tell she's considered every aspect of this world. She knows details about it that would probably shock every single one of us, and she weaves a lot of those details into this story, and that's just really cool. This book continues to adhere to the things that she put into book 1 and book 2, but it builds on that even more, and that's just amazing. So who do I think should read this one? If you're a reader who already started the series, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't finish it. This book gives you a satisfying conclusion, and yes, it's sad that the trilogy is over, but it's a really well done way to end the trilogy. If you like stories with incredible world building and character development, I think you should start with Cruel Prince and just immerse yourself in this world. If you like the enemies to lovers trope, I'm not even sure what you're waiting for. Go get the first book in this series and get started. My rating? Overall, I went 5 stars for this one. This book will appeal to not only fantasy readers, but also to romance readers. There's a little bit of something for everyone in this one. There's even some action in there. I really think this book is a 5-star read a lot of people are going to love. So 5 stars for The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. All right, watchers, you just heard me give this book 5 stars. That means if you have a book that you think is similar to this book, please make sure you drop the name of the book and the author down below in the comments, because I'll be choosing books based on this one for next month's TBR. The next book I read in the month of March was The First I Do by Sarah N. Ham. This is a young adult as an age category, romance as your genre. It was independently published in 2019 and it is 188 pages. I did receive an electronic copy of this title from the author, and I am giving my honest review. Your synopsis. Mabel and Mitchell are about to find out they were secretly wed years ago. Will the two decide to honor their marriage or get it annulled? What didn't I like about this story? Well, the first thing I can say I didn't like is the bleeping. So lots of people have weighed in with strong opinions on social media about whether or not they like cursing in YA novels. I've personally stayed out of the discussion a lot. I don't tend to have a huge problem with it. Look, teenagers curse. It's what we do. I'm sorry. But it turns out that replacing letters of the word with little stars, literally bleeping out your character in a book, drives me crazy. I guess I don't care whether you cuss in YA novels or not, but make a choice and live with your choice. The next thing I can say I didn't like about this one is the premise overall was highly unbelievable. And that really kept bothering me because it keeps coming up, and it's the premise for the entire book. Absolutely no court ever would allow children to enter into a binding legal contract. It's literally part of the reason why binding legal contracts exist. It's like contract law 101. This would literally never happen. So the entire premise of the story kept coming up, and I was irritated with it the whole time. So I found myself a little unable to push past that and put that disbelief to the side in order to enjoy this story. The next thing I can say I didn't like is the dialogue was a little clunky and unnatural a few times in the story. There were also a few grammatical errors. I'm kind of lumping both of those together into one thing I didn't like because I think one more good editing pass would have caught all of that for this author. So what did I like about this one? Well, this story is told in alternating viewpoints. The idea of telling a romance by both the male and the female viewpoint, I think is really cool. I dig that idea. The next thing I can say I liked about this one is that the characters do read as real characters, not just Mabel and Michael, but also Drake Parker. They had motivation for their actions. They made decisions based on their motivation, so I liked that. Those characters felt real. The third thing I can say you might like about this one is it does have the cute happily ever after ending that is typical for the romance genre. So who do I think should read this one? If you're looking for a Christian romance and you can suspend disbelief a little bit, you may like this one even more than I did. If you're a Christian teenager struggling to understand how your relationship works with what the church is telling you relationship should be, you might enjoy how this one has a little insight into that. My rating, overall I went 2 stars for this one. For me it was problematic. That backstory, that back premise for this one was just something I couldn't let go of, which I know is a personal thing. Reviews are really subjective and you may very well feel differently, but I gave 2 stars to The First I Do by Sarah N. Ham. The next book I read in the month of March was The Bike Thief by Brett Scott Ermilio. This was independently published in 2019. It is a middle grade book and it's a mystery thriller at 205 pages. I actually received an audiobook of this one, but from the narrator in exchange for an honest review. Your synopsis. There's been a bunch of bike thefts in town, but have no fear. Jack Cannon and his vagabond group of detectives are on the case. Can Jack and his crew prove who's behind the bike thefts? Will they put themselves in danger trying? So what didn't I like about this one? The only thing that came to mind when I started thinking about what I didn't like is the speech tags. They're all very detailed and they appear after almost every piece of dialogue, which makes this a little cumbersome for conversations. The other thing that I didn't particularly like about this one is stereotypical characters. There's a chubby comic relief best friend, there's a smart main character who speaks in full sentences, there's a smart and beautiful girl, there's a genius kid sister, there's an eccentric grandpa. These are all characters we've heard of before, just all thrown together in this one novel. The only other thing I can say I wasn't crazy about in this book is that there is one unnecessary dream sequence that I really wish hadn't been in the book at all. So what did I like about this one? Well, this is a big one. The mystery in this book is solid. It is cute. It's good for kids. It sort of reminds me of like Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys or Harriet the Spy. It's fun, it's relatable, it's realistic, but it's still a solid mystery. The next thing I can say I liked about this one is the big lessons in this one revolve around friendship and accepting others and not judging, and those are so important to have in a middle grade book. It's great implied themes for kids, all wrapped up in a fun story they're going to love. The third thing I can say I liked about this one is that the action scenes are fun and yet really well written. They're entertaining, and I think middle grade readers are going to have no problem picturing exactly what happened in this story. This would be a fun one to read with a middle grade group and maybe draw comic strips for, because kids are going to be able to perfectly picture the events that are happening in this story. Who do I think should read this one? If you're a 4th, 5th, or 6th grade student who likes mystery stories and you like following clues along with children, this is going to be one you really enjoy. I could see this one being a fun study in a classroom for predicting, or like I said, for comic books of events, sequence of event stories with 4th through 6th graders. My rating, overall, I went 4 stars for this one. I think this is going to appeal to any middle grade reader who likes clue hunting in their mystery stories. So 4 stars for The Bike Thief by Brett Scott Ermilio. The next book I read in the month of March was The Sweeney Sisters by Lian Dolan. This is an adult age category contemporary novel. It's coming in April of 2020 by William Morrow, and it is 304 pages. I did receive an electronic advanced reader copy of this book from NetGalley and William Morrow. Your synopsis. Maggie, Eliza, and Tricia Sweeney grew up happy in idyllic Connecticut. But when their father unexpectedly dies, it will leave the girls floundering to try to decide how to honor such a prominent man, especially when his death also brings about an unexpected twist in the form of a surprise half-sister. So what didn't I like about this one? The biggest thing I can say bothered me about this one is it seems really out of touch with real life. I don't say this about a lot of books, but for this one, it just felt really markedly out of touch. I think part of the problem is that these girls are very, very privileged. They are from upper class Connecticut. They just feel like they don't understand the struggle of real life. Even their problems felt out of touch and upper class for me, and they just felt too privileged. So that was the first problem that I had with this book. The next thing I wasn't crazy about in this book, and I don't think I have ever said this about a book before, is that the multiple viewpoints didn't work for me. I normally love multiple viewpoint books, but in this one I think part of the problem was that it jumps viewpoints in the middle of a chapter with little or no warning. In addition to that, there doesn't seem to be a pattern to it. So it's not like you're following one sister and then you know you're going to the next one. It jumped randomly, they were different lengths, they were in different spots, they were in different orders. It was very jarring. The next thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that it does have some pacing issues. There are definitely spots of this book that are a little slow, where you feel like you're waiting for something to happen. So what did I like about this book? The big one is the sisters themselves are very well written. Not only the individual sisters, who each have their own personality, that's very concrete and very well written, but the beauty of this book is in the way the 4 sisters come together to make sort of a realistic pictures of how sisters actually interact. There were times when I could picture my sister and I interacting through the conversations these sisters were having, so it was very well written. For this next one, this is something I think I've never done before. I'm about to tell you something I think you will like that I actually didn't necessarily like. I do this a lot with things I didn't like or I think you won't like as content warnings. This is the opposite side of that. I think a lot of you really will like this. If you're the kind of reader who likes when an ending is nicely wrapped up, bow tied around it, happily ever after, very good ending, you're going to love this one. You know that's not necessarily me. I don't always like that. But I know there are going to be a lot of readers who read this exactly for that. The last thing I can say I like about this one is the language is really well done. This author has beautiful language. I found myself enjoying sentences she crafted on more than one occasion. But remember, I am working from an advanced reader copy, so I will say there were a few grammatical errors in my copy that I hope the publisher will catch before it becomes live for you. Basically, if you like beautifully well-written sentences, I think you'll enjoy this as well. So who do I think should read this one? If you're the kind of reader who likes emotional stories about women connecting with their families, you're going to love this one. If you like a romance-style feel to a contemporary story, I think you'll like this one. I consider this to be similar in style to a book I previously read, Beachcombers by Nancy Thayer. So if you liked that one, I think you'll really like this one. My reading, overall I went 3 stars for this one. It's a good book that explores the relationship between these sisters. I don't think it'll appeal to every contemporary fan, but if you find yourself liking the niches I talked about, I think you're going to love this one. So 3 stars for the Sweeney Sisters by Lian Dolan. This next book had the lowest reader average on Goodreads before this month started. The next book I read for the month of March is the Guys Read Thriller Anthology. It's a 2011 release by HarperCollins. It's a middle grade mystery thriller and it is 272 pages. So, Boys Will Be Boys by James Patterson is a short story and it was the lowest rated book on my TBR before this month started. Then I went to the library and it turns out that Boys Will Be Boys is a short story featured in the anthology Guys Read Thriller. So I decided I was going to read the entire anthology. So I'm going to rate this anthology, talk about the anthology, but I will make sure to talk also about that specific short story. Your synopsis. This compilation is chock full of mystery and intrigue. It features some big names in publishing and it was compiled by John Syka. So what didn't I like about this story? Well, let's start with the short story I was supposed to be reading for the Shield Challenge. The James Patterson short story in here ends too quickly. And it is not intense enough when you compare it to the other 9 that are featured in this anthology. If you look at it alone, I can understand why it was rated low by itself. It doesn't build up fast enough and it doesn't end on a pleasing note. So overall, I would agree if that story was a standalone, it would have a pretty low rating. As for the anthology as a whole, I hate the idea that this series was marked as a guys read material. I'm a girl and I love thrillers. In fact, middle grade me would have loved this anthology. And yet I would have been uncomfortable carrying this around in my backpack or being seen in public reading this because of the title, which is silly, and I know that. So it bothers me that they felt like they had to single out who this book was for. The next thing I can say I didn't particularly like about this anthology as a whole is that overall it kind of lacked diversity. All of the stories felt like they basically have the same main character, with a few exceptions. I should say most of the stories felt like they had the same basic main character. I really would have liked more variety. So what did I like about this book? Well, in considering just the James Patterson one that I'm supposed to be thinking about for the Shield Challenge, I did like that it had good language and good dialogue. It has a really nice flow, and I felt like the story moved very quickly, even when compared with the others in the anthology. The anthology as a whole, as a collection, honestly is great. Some of these stories are scary, some of them are funny, some of them are quirky, some of them are cute. It's a great mix of lessons, mysteries, and big scares. I will say that the story, Believing in Brooklyn, is the best story in this anthology, in my opinion. The message in that one is great. The story is amazing. I would tear that one apart in a middle school classroom and use it for tons of lessons. It's just a great short story. I would have rated that story alone higher than I rated this anthology. So who do I think should read this one? If you're a middle grade reader of any gender who happens to like mysterious or scary stories, you are going to love this collection. If you're a middle grade reader or a middle grade teacher and you're looking for something unique and a little bit different, I think you might like the way this collection pairs up different stories. You've got ghost stories mixed in with detective stories all in one book. If overall you are a reader who likes fast, short stories that sometimes give you chills, check this one out. My rating? I said 3 stars for this one. This is a good middle grade anthology. It will appeal to anyone who likes quick, fast reads in this genre. The only reason why I'm giving it 3 stars is because I feel like they put themselves in a niche by saying right on the cover this was specifically for guys. So although I think you can ignore that, they've decided to put themselves in a niche genre, and I give 3 stars to niche books. So 3 stars to Guys Read Thriller. Okay, that's it for me on the first 5 books I read in March. If you have a recommendation for me based on something you saw here, drop a comment down below so I can add that to my TBR. If you are an author or a publisher that had a part in bringing a book to life you think I'd enjoy, follow the link down in the description to send me that book so that it may get added up a little higher in my TBR and you maybe won't have to wait as long. Until then, drop a comment to let me know you're still here. Hit subscribe and tap that little bell so you know when I'm back. Keep plotting the path to your dreams, and I will see you next time. Bye!